Hi, I'm Ben, and today we're going to make a concrete fire pit. I made the formwork for the concrete out of 2x4s and 2x6s. You can get all the measurements and technical details on my website. After cutting all the pieces of wood, I screwed them together into panels. And then I used L brackets to turn those panels into a big frame. I then placed the frame in the desired location and dug around it to mark the perimeter. And now I began the real work. Oh my god, digging is not easy. I have full-on respect for people that do manual labor because this was brutal. Even with a helper, it was still pretty rough. And we only dug about 8 inches down. I compacted the earth and tried to make it as level as possible, and then filled it with about 3.5 inches of gravel, which I also tried to level. Once I had the gravel nice and compacted, I was ready to place the mold. I started first with the larger outer ring, and then placed the smaller inner ring. I checked my measurements to make sure that the inner ring was right in the center, and once it was, I screwed it into place with a couple of extra 2x3s. Once the mold was in the right place, I did one last check to make sure it was level. With my formwork in place, I was ready to locate the rebar. I drove some stakes into the ground and then wired the horizontal pieces into place. With the rebar in place, I was ready to get started on the masonry portion of the project. I used Quikrete 5000 for the concrete, fire bricks, and a mixture of mortar clay, Portland cement, and sand for the mortar. I begin by mixing the Quikrete 5000 and pouring a concrete foundation about 3.5 inches thick. I used a 2x4 on the bottom row of the formwork so I can use that line to make sure that I'm adding the right amount of concrete. This first pour of concrete is going to be the foundation for the whole project, so make sure you push it down to all the corners. Let the concrete cure at least 20 hours before mixing the mortar and adding in the bricks. I started with a layer of mortar around the inside of the formwork, then placed each brick one at a time vertically against the inside formwork. This is my first time laying brick, and it certainly didn't come out very pretty, but it'll get all sooty after a while and just look black, so I wasn't too concerned about the aesthetics. With the bricks in place, I was ready to get back to mixing and pouring concrete. After pouring about another 5 inches, I realized that my first set of rebar wasn't long enough, so I just stuck in some more to connect the different layers and pours. And while I could have probably done this last pour all at once, mixing concrete's hard, and I decided to do it in 2 shots. But the good news is I was now ready to take off the additional formwork and bracing since the last pour of concrete locked it into place. So now I was ready for the stretch run and mixed and poured my last series of batches of concrete. Once the formwork was full, I used a nice straight piece of wood to screed the top of the concrete. I let the concrete sit about half an hour and then used a float to level out the surface of the concrete. After using the float, I waited 1 more hour and then finished it off with a steel trowel. I then covered the concrete to let it cure without it drying out too much. I kept the concrete moist and let it cure for a full 48 hours before removing the molds. Now the inside frame of the formwork got a little bit wet and the wood swelled up, so getting it out was kind of difficult. I actually had to cut it a few different times in order to pry it free. I probably should have cut an angle in the boards beforehand to make this a little bit easier. I added 2 buckets of lava rock into the bottom of the fire pit to create a nice, thermally resistant surface for starting fires on. Concrete can retain moisture, and the purpose of the lava rock and fire bricks is to protect the concrete from the flame. Thanks for watching. For detailed instructions, check out my website. We got all the measurements and product information. And be sure to follow me on social media.